So now we're going to do a weaving activity that you can do at home. All you need is some cardboard, some scissors, and some yarn. You'll want at least two different kinds of yarn or colors of yarn. So we'll start by marking each end of our loom. This is going to be the loom. And I didn't want 1/2 inches or 1/4 inches, but something in between, so I made a little template. Marked the edges here, and I'm going to mark the edges here. And then we're going to cut those as little slits, and that will be where the yarn will go. So you cut just a little ways in, maybe 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch from the edge, and cut on each of those lines to make slits in the ends of the loom. That's going to be for warping your loom, which means to putting the warp on, which is the threads that go up and down. They stay on the loom, and you weave the weft in and out of them. You want to have an even number of strips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, and you can make your weaving just a portion of this, or you can use the whole width. So we're going to warp the loom, and we're going to leave that yarn on the ball. We're going to slip the yarn down between in the slot, and then go down to the slot at the bottom that corresponds. Go up the back into the next slot, down and through that slot. You want a pretty good tension. You don't want it super tight, but you want a fairly good tension on your yarn as you're warping the loom. If you wanted to make a bracelet or something skinnier, you would just warp on the inner maybe 4 or 5 slots, and that would make a thin piece. So when you get done, cut the yarn, and you're going to tie it to the other piece of yarn in the back. That's the back of the loom. You can just tie a bow or even a knot, it doesn't matter. Just want to secure it. And now you're ready to weave. So now we're going to start weaving with this yarn, and we do that by going over one thread, one yarn, and under the next. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And then we pull this through till it's almost at the end, and then we want to move it all the way to the top or the bottom, whichever is more comfortable, and just leave that end sticking out. Now if this is coming out from underneath the last thread, then when we go back, we want to go over that thread and under the next one. Over, under, over, under. You can also use a needle, like a little plastic yarn needle would work just fine, and pull it until it's almost tight. You don't want it to be too tight. You don't want this to be bent by tightening that up. So just enough to snug it up against that last string, but not enough to pull it. I'll show what it looks like. That you don't want that, because then the edge will be too tight. So then it's coming out from under the yarn here, so I'm going to go over that one, under the next, over, under, over, under, over, under. Pull it through. Now if you have yarn that's all the same, that's the same color, you can change to a different color yarn at any point, and you do that by weaving part way through, maybe to the middle, cutting off your yarn there, and starting your new yarn wherever you left off, and that will give you You can do any colors that you'd like. Okay. So I'm about halfway through the weaving, and I'm going to show you how to start a new piece of yarn. You want to cut lengths of yarn that are not too long and just work with a length that you cut rather than trying to use a really long piece to fill up the whole weaving. So that was going under. I'm going to go under there, over under, and pull this new yarn all the way through and let it settle there, and then the next row will cover it up. And I'll just push this down, tuck that so it doesn't stick out. And that's how you get a new piece of yarn. Okay, now to finish up the weaving, I'm going to do the last row, over, under. And then this time, to hide this thread, I'm going to just push the needle down through next to that last warp thread. Pull it through. And trim it. And then we turn the loom over and cut all the pieces in the middle. Gently take them out of the slots. And tie each pair together. You can tie them like you tie a shoe, or you can do it this way, which makes it a little bit more like a fringe when you're finished. So do a knot with the two pieces that are next to each other. And then you have a little bit of fringe if you want to leave it, or you can trim it off. And we'll do the same thing with the other side. And so there's the last knot tied off. And there's your weaving. And you could use it for a little coaster, or you can hang it on your wall or something like that. So happy weaving.